Namaste, everyone. Need to inform that the host for today's program, Major Himanshu Bhardwaj ji, had to roll out due to some emergency. Therefore, I, Adarsh Anand, will be the host, will be the one hosting. Namaste. This is Adarsh Anand on the other side. Thank you for being present. Today, we are here at the program organized by Azad Hind. Azad Hind is being set up with the purpose to bring armed services personnel together globally to form a support community and network and to capture reminiscences of war battle veterans on YouTube, social media, and to showcase experiences of veterans to inspire the younger generation to join the services. We also offer book writing and publishing assistance to the veteran community. We also can offer help and assistance, coaching and training for NDA entrance exams to the needy on case by case basis. Also, our inspiration is historical of this Azad Hind Fauj is Azad Hind and the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose because of his leadership and specifically because of his military skills. So we today just So we today have with us our guest Major General Harsha Kakar ji with us, who will enlighten us with the security challenges facing India. Major General Harsha Kakar was commissioned into the Regiment of Artillery in June 1979 and superannuated in March 2015 as a Major General. During his military service, he held a variety of appointments in every part of the country. He was the head of Department in Strategic Studies at the College of Defense Management, where he wrote extensively on futuristic planning and enhancing joint operations. He also served as part of the United Nations peacekeeping operations in Mozambique. In addition to training courses in India, he attended the National Security Studies course at the Canadian Forces College in Toronto. He is the first officer from India to attend this course. Post his superannuation, he settled in Lucknow, where he extensively write for few newspapers, magazines, and online newsletters. He is also a security analyst on multiple TV channels. Welcome, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Adarsh.
coming. Thank you for coming, and hope you will we will have a good talk today. So over to you.
Thank you, Adarsh. Thank you, Azad Hind, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and views. Let me say, I don't want to go into discussing with you all my personal service life. Reason being, I think it's about time we in India started looking way beyond where we are. We analyze as to what exactly is going on and what is the impact. So today, rather than India's security challenges, I'm going to cover India's challenges. It's something which I want you all to look at, not just today, but look at it in a manner that it becomes a hobby or an interest. I think Jai Shankar once said, very recently, he made a statement that Indians must start looking at foreign policy. I think we must look at least beyond our scope. So let me start. Global instability is on the rise, and there is no doubt. The ongoing wars in Ukraine and Palestine have the possibility of expanding and engulfing larger regions. There are nation groups which support either side, directly or indirectly with weapons, ammunition, spare parts, funds, diplomatic, or even moral support. The UN has been powerless to intercede, as also the United Nations Security Council has been unable to pass any meaningful resolution. Asia, though away from both conflicts, is equally unstable and in some manner impacted by these conflicts. Chinese hegemony in the Indo-Pacific is being countered by nations with whom it is in conflict. India supports countries challenging China. Nations have begun to stand up against bullying and pressures because there is someone who supports them, as the US and the Quad are doing in the South and East China Seas. Smaller countries prefer aligning with distant powers, assuming they cannot interfere directly in their internal matters. Maldives, Sri Lanka, and occasionally Nepal are examples where political parties exploit proximity with Big Brother India as an election tool to win power. They claim China is preferred to India as it is distant, as also can fund projects through the Belt Road Initiative. The fact that they get into debt traps is not a concern because all political leaders look for the current, not the long-term future. Or I should say most political leaders. The Indian subcontinent faces its own set of challenges. Indo-China and Indo-Pak conflict have their impact in the region. SARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, is defunct. And India and China are open competitors, seeking to influence the other's region of dominance. While India supplies BrahMos missiles to Philippines, enters into naval exercises with Vietnam, as also provides it with weapons and training, possessing a close relationship with Tokyo and Seoul, all of whom are in conflict with China. China is doing the same in our region of influence. It is expanding its presence in Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh. It is already there in Pakistan. This is reality and must be accepted. Simultaneously, competition between India and China in every sphere is bound to grow in the coming days. This would, apart from being in the military domain, also include economy and regions of influence. What about India? It faces its own ring of challenges, some due to countries in its vicinity, some flowing from global conflicts, while others due to its expanding national power, which a national power, incidentally, is a combination of diplomatic, economic, and military power all entwined. India's growing national power has added to jealousy in parts of the globe, and there are organizations working to reduce its influence. I will cover all this as we go along. Now, let me start by listing out the challenges faced by India. I'll cover them one by one. Coming to military challenges, these are well known, or our security challenges, these are well known. The standoff with China is now entering its fifth year, with India refusing to yield ground. The Prime Minister did offer an olive branch in his interview with the Newsweek. That was, I think, a week back, the first since the standoff began. However, he did not budge from the fact that unless the border scenario is normal, relations cannot change. He emphasized what we've been saying all along, that dialogue is the only way forward. It was noted by China. Their response expected lines, but any formal response would only flow after elections and the new government being sworn in. The impact, increased troop deployment is the order of the day. Capability, capacity enhancement, and infrastructure development to reduce the gap with China continues. Increased Chinese deployment means forces cannot let their guard down. Pakistan is no longer a major military threat. but terrorism continues to flow. Normalcy cannot be restored, as its conditions for restoration from Pakistan's side, which is reinstating Article 370, is a figment of their imagination and will never be met. Hence, troop deployment along the borders will continue. However, Rawalpindi will never let the situation go to levels where India will be compelled to respond by force. Balakot remains ingrained in Pak security planners' minds. They cannot risk another incident. The open border with Nepal is being exploited for infiltration by Pak terrorists and Chinese. A number of Chinese with Nepalese passports are being arrested. The conflict in Myanmar along the Indo-Myanmar border is pushing refugees into India, some of whom have ties on our side. The border is exploited by the Northeast terrorist groups, which have camps in Myanmar and cross the border to strike. It's an open border. The government directions to fence it is going to take quite some time. The border with Bangladesh, partially fenced, remains vulnerable. Those who've been along that border, I have been there and I've seen it myself. Rivers, villages split between both sides. You have a road which goes, houses on one side are in India, houses on the other are in Bangladesh. And there are other terrain friction points which are not easy to fend or cover. Human migration from Bangladesh and cattle smuggling from India is a regular occurrence. Infiltration from Myanmar and Bangladesh impacts demography of regions in their vicinity and will have a greater impact as time passes. Let's go to the next set of threats, which is insurgencies. India has battled insurgencies from soon after its independence. Some have been resolved, some continue at low key, while peace agreements have reduced tensions in a few areas. All insurgencies that we faced are sponsored by our neighbors. This has impacted us economically as also socially, resulting in displacement of population. In some cases, it's been alienation of population against the state, as also we've seen incidents in the Northeast where there has been an anger against the state and security forces. It has sucked in security forces to curb them, impacting expenditure. This is not something that's likely to end. It's going to continue in some form for some time ahead. The third challenge that we face is the economy. As the current ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine continue, possibly even expand, especially in the Middle East, there would be an impact on oil prices and trade, as ships would be forced to bypass conflict zones. We've seen a few ships being impacted by the Houthis and not captured by the Iranians. Ultimately, in case it expands, they will bypass the region. The economic impact will be high for India. Foreign direct investment may be impacted, so would trade. The rupee would drop, adding to our import costs. Tensions in the South and East China Sea, as also the Indo-Pacific, will also have an economic impact. We must remember that tensions with China have already impacted the economy, as the defense budget has been witnessing a regular hike. This hike in the defense budget comes at the cost of something else: social welfare, development, healthcare, something or the other. After all, the cake size is fixed. How it's divided is what counts. India's economy is currently the world's fifth largest, slated to be the third largest in the near future. An added attraction is India's rising middle class and huge market. Nations are rushing in to ink free trade agreements with India. As Piyush Goyal mentioned recently, I'm going to quote him. The world today knows that when you negotiate with India, you're negotiating with a 35 trillion economy, not a 3.5 trillion economy. Unless we get free trade agreements on our terms, we don't rush into closing any negotiation. He also mentioned some people also live in a colonial mindset of the past, and it takes us some more time to get them to understand that ground realities have changed. Today, India is far more economically stronger than colonial past. And this, as we go along, I will explain the impact. Indian economy remains vulnerable to multiple factors, external and internal. Internally, floods, violence, planned or spontaneous, has also increased border tensions, while external are ongoing global conflicts. The next factor is population. India is today the world's most populated nation. This has both advantages and disadvantages. The government is seeking to exploit this by converting India into a country which can provide skilled manpower globally. While we already do so to the Middle East, we've also inked agreements with Taiwan and Israel. The downside is creating employment avenues within, as also providing for this growing populace. We may be the fifth largest economy today, but with our population, our per capita income is 120th in the world. Increasing population will remain a challenge in the years ahead. Coming to something which has been a largely success story, but also has its own challenges, is diplomacy. India's diplomacy is currently lauded in the world. At the same time, there is criticism on our stand on global issues. As Jaishankar said recently, no major issue in the world is decided without some consultation with India. India's neutrality and decision to follow the India First principle has faced global flack. At the same time, nations realize that you cannot push India beyond a point. On multiple platforms, India has been accused of procuring Russian oil, thereby funding the war indirectly. Jaishankar had to hit back at these comments in many of his media and public interactions abroad, because of the feeling that India, an ex-colonial power, is not adhering to the norms of the West, which are used to being colonial powers. We must also remember that India was amongst the very few which could enforce a ceasefire in Ukraine to enable its students to be escorted out. Amazingly, convoys of Indian students were escorted by Ukrainian forces to the Polish border through a humanitarian corridor established by Ukrainian and Russian authorities. It was the peak of Indian diplomatic success. India today is the voice of the global South, the only nation which has stood with weaker nations in COVID. If you look at the comments that the diplomats have made in the UN General Assembly, that when we went to Western nations, they stored vaccines. But before we could blink an eye, India provided it. There is largely a consensus for India's entry into the United Nations Security Council as a permanent member. The week about a fortnight ago by the Ukrainian foreign minister to India was possibly to request India to negotiate to end the crisis. There's something else which happened a week ago. I don't know how many of you followed it. India had the power to change decisions of nations which claimed to be far more powerful. Recollect the criticism of Germany on the arrest of Arvind Kejriwal and the IT notice to the Congress. The German Foreign Ministry spokesman in Berlin mentioned Mr. Kejriwal is entitled to a fair and impartial trial. This includes he can make use of all available legal avenues without restrictions. The Ministry of External Affairs summoned the German deputy head of mission. What transpired in the MEA is unknown, but the impact was immediate. Give me a second, I'll just take a sip of water. The same foreign ministry spokesman mentioned the very next day the topic was discussed with the MEA. Let me emphasize that once again that we, India and Germany, have a great interest in closer cooperation and together in an atmosphere of trust. The Indian Constitution guarantees fundamental human values and freedoms. And we share these democratic values with India as an important partner in Asia. It was a 180-degree turn immediately after summoning. The German economy is is number 3 in the world today. Why did this turn take place? Germany is keen to invest in the Indian defense market. It is one of the 2 final contenders for the submarine project. It is India's largest trading partner in the EU. India must have twisted the tape, no doubt. But the fact is, you compelled a nation like Germany to make a U-turn in a day. No other nation in Europe after that has passed any comment. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where our power stands. However, there is jealousy. There is a desire to pull India down and project it as not being a responsible global power. Former global colonial powers dislike the fact that an erstwhile colony has greater power and say than them. And from here, I want to go to the next challenge, which is actually linked to this, and that is the informational challenge. There is a grouping which has been created to bring the nation down. There are agencies and governments working to project India in bad light. The Guardian, I don't know how many of you read that article, published an article quoting anonymous sources. I repeat the word, quoting anonymous sources, claiming India was carrying out judicial killings abroad, including in Pakistan. It subsequently went ahead and twisted the statements of the defense and prime minister to defend its article, which had come under immense cloud. You will notice there are various groups, including spokesperson from the US, who regularly comment in India. Let me take you through a few more examples of comments against us, largely during this electioneering period, especially now that elections are ongoing, or during a very important visit by the PM. Chatham House, a British think tank, mentioned less than a week ago, over the decade that the BJP has been in power, assessment of the country's democracy have pointed to a downward trajectory, with its democratic principles, including freedom of expression, under strain. The Irish Times last week, in an editorial, mentioned they're talking about PM Modi, has lent heavily on a widespread crackdown on free speech and opposition party, with hundreds of politically targeted corruption and tax cases filed against opposition MPs and leaders. India's democratic credentials have been severely tarnished. This led to the Indian ambassador in Ireland, something which never happens before, Akhilesh Mishra, responding by a letter to the editor, which is published. He faced flack in India by political parties, that's from the opposition. But the fact is, he had to respond after having read this. In June last year, when PM Modi was on a visit to the US, was to visit the US, 70 members of the Senate sent a letter to President Biden mentioning a series of independent, credible reports reflect troubling signs in India toward the shrinking of political space, the rise of religious intolerance, the targeting of civil society organizations and journalists, and growing restrictions on press freedom and internet access. Yet, the same PM Modi received a standing ovation post his address to the US Congress in this visit itself. The Swedish based VDEM Institute mentions that India is on the verge of losing its status as a democracy because of severe shrinking of space for the media, civil society, and opposition. It classifies India as an electoral autocracy. Freedom House terms India as a partially free democracy. But while you're getting this criticism, you look at what Morning Consult, a US based research company, announces, and it's been doing so from 2021 to 2024, the last report being in February 2024, that PM Modi is the world's most popular leader with an over 78% rating. Can this rating, can this percentage exist if the criticism which is being projected in multiple media networks are true? Whenever there has been an address to the Indian diaspora by the PM, the crowds have been overflowing. When you look at the countries where he speaks, whether it's Australia, whether it's US, whether it's Singapore, wherever he speaks, those who attend are educated. They know what is democracy. They have pro-India feelings, fine. They also have relatives in India. So if the government was doing wrong, if it was suppressing democracy, would they attend in such numbers? Would they display their love for the current leadership? Now you look at the difference in the views of global leaders when it comes down to the sort of popularity that exists. In Sydney, the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese mentioned during the rally, the last time I saw someone on the stage was Bruce Springsteen, and he did not get the welcome that PM Modi has got. PM Modi is the boss. When questioned subsequently on a TV debate that you are appearing alongside tyrant Modi on the stage and calling him a boss, Albanese replied, India is, of course, the world's largest democracy. PM Modi is certainly popular, not with everyone. It's a democracy, but he's popular with the majority of people. Now you look at what Ria Mogul writes in CNN. At his PM Modi's rallies, tens of thousands gathered in near frenzied religious devotion in support of a man whose policies, they say, have transformed the lives of ordinary Indians and helped enshrine the nascent promise of social mobility in a country still driven by caste divisions. She further writes, according to the 2023 Pew Research, 1 in 8 Indian adults have a favorable view of Modi. 8 in 10 Indian adults, have a favorable view of Modi, including 55% who have a very favorable view. Yet, when you look at the Western press, India is singled out, PM Modi is singled out for criticism. The only answer that I can give to this is Jaishankar stating it's because the West has a bad habit of commenting on others. They somehow think it's a gone given right. Now, from here, I want to move to the next challenge, which is internal unrest. We faced internal divide for a long time. It could be religion, it could be caste, it could be region. The recent Manipur clashes and the background behind it, both religion as well as caste, are well known. Religion and caste violence has been witnessed by us for years. What is now increasing is region. Politicians are playing up South India versus North India, East India versus the rest of India. This sort of a divide is a major challenge if it keeps getting blown up regularly. We've had some very sad cases where our brethren from the Northeast have been mistaken for Chinese and attacked in parts of the country. Most of it flowing from lack of awareness and education and possibly understanding. This is where we, as the educated, must play our part. I have tried to do it whenever I speak. We must look to bridge this gap. We can do it by interactions, by explanations. We have to project we are Indians first and the rest later. Added in this divisive action that we go through is narco-terrorism, drugs and arms trafficking, human trafficking, organized crime from across the border, inflow of refugees, or migrations, changing regional dynamics. The impact of social media to move the country away from the current path where it is, to look to enhance the divide within ourselves. Cryptocurrency, sponsored protests, violence which is largely sponsored, timed to perfection. All this is aiming to break the fabric of society. There could be much more. I'm not mentioning disasters and pandemics, which of course one could call it a black swan event. The next that I want to touch on is our culture and traditions. These are being challenged. Western influence is making us forget what our Indian values are. If it continues, it will impact Indian society in the years ahead. I was attending an Uthala yesterday in a Gurdwara. And I read outside the Gurdwara a notice. It stated, our women who come in jeans to the Gurdwara must cover their heads with a dupatta. This is our maryada given to us by our forefathers. I was shocked because such a notice implies that we are breaking what is our culture. We are forgetting our traditions. India was known for unity in diversity. Our dances, our music, our traditions and beliefs were vastly different from the West. The Western culture could be about 2000 odd. Hinduism is way older than other religions. Our culture, our civilization is way older. While we embrace Western culture, we must not lose sight of our own. Ladies and gentlemen, I could go on and on, but I've decided to halt here. I may have left out a few subjects. My intent was to create a platform to open your minds and initiate discussion. Thank you. I'm now open to suggestion and questions.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So, thank you for enlightening us. And now it's the turn of the audience. I will request our audience to ask questions if they have any. Also, you can type your questions in the chat box, or you can directly ask sir by turning your cameras on. So you need to turn your videos on. Otherwise, you can write your questions in the chat box. So if any of you have some questions, till then I have one. Okay, sir, so actually you mentioned about the hate, that is peddling against our cultures and traditions, everything. So now, before 30 to 35 minutes, I was actually reading a article written by Telegraph. So it noted Italy is among one of the top 25 dishes causing most damage to biodiversity, says scientists. So this is the article. Okay, it is targeting Italy. So not only cultures, everything starting from our food traditions, everything is being questioned. I need to ask you that why this jealousy? So is this because of the development? Yeah, is this because we are gaining a reputed space in the international media, international forums? So why this jealousy?
See, if you notice, there are, as you know, that there are groups that are formed with the intention of projecting the country downward. It is not, something which is across the board. You will not find that flowing from all nations. The moment the Guardian report came,
Hmm.
Canada jumped, Pakistan jumped, the US didn't want to comment. Not a nation, neither France or any of the others have commented. You will not find anything flowing from people who understand India. There is a feeling, you see, you have risen from where you were, and now today you're the fifth largest. When you look at national power, today there is no nation which can operate in the Indo Pacific unless it ties up with India. Today, any nation which is wanting to influence the Indo Pacific has to come to India. Today, we control the region, the Malacca Straits, the area around. Today, it's our navy which is protecting other ships. Now, for nations which were once powerful are no longer there, and you have to look at a country like India. Naturally, you feel, what the hell are we? And today we are at a stage where not only anything else, we are today projecting in Africa. Today, by moving in our military attaches to different countries in Africa, you're projecting a very different image of Indian military power. And when I was in Canada doing the course, you'd be surprised to know that that country talks so much. The armed forces consisted of 4 composite brigades. That's it. There was so much of division within, there was so much of issues which I was surprised when I started dealing with them with the lack of knowledge. When I started raising questions to guest speakers and they asked me, how come you know so much? I said, I'm coming from India. India, you have to have a global exposure. And there is a feeling that we are the West, we are better educated, we have a better, I mean, sort of better industrial base, but you forget that India is rising. And that is something which is causing a lot of pain.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the answer. Now, Rohit ji has one question. Let me read this out. So actually, he asks, so do you think India need to take a firm stand in on the Israel-Palestine issue? So, do you think India needs to, support Israel, very firmly, or India needs to go into the side of Palestine? So India is, taking a very mid stand. So I think he wants to ask, if India can go for one stand, that will be more firm and that can be possessed as a very powerful stand. Do
See,
you think?
the first thing that India has followed till now is the India First policy. That is
Hmm.
with our relationship, depending on the way it is. Historically, we've always been with Palestine. It is the current leadership from 2014, actually, which has built its ties with Israel far more. The fact is, we are against terrorism. So, therefore, as far as the attack of October 7th was concerned, we were standing behind Israel. There is no doubt about it. And that is something we've refused to budge from. At the same time, we've always been demanding a two-state solution because unless you give the Palestinians a separate state, there can never be peace. I've insisted on this fact in a lot of my writings, and those who are interested can visit my blog, harshakakararticles.com. You'll get about 1,500 articles. And there's a lot in the recent times on Israel Palestine. The fact remains, we know it, Israelis know it, that you cannot wipe off the idea of Hamas. You may eradicate Hamas now, you may kill the organization now, you may do what you want. It will rise again in a few years because the people have been suppressed. The casualties have been caused. And we realize that that is not going to get peace to the area. It may buy Israel a few years of peace. It will not be lasting peace unless there is a separate land created. Therefore, we've been insisting on two facts. We support Israel as far as October 7th is concerned. We demand humanitarian assistance for the Gazans, after all, they're humans. And we're demanding a two-state solution, which the whole world wants. We're not the only ones, except Israel. The US has voted against it in the UN Security Council because it says it must come through with discussion, not by law through the UN. That is the only difference. So it's not that you should support one against the other. You are following what is the right national policy, and I think that is the right option, supporting Israel as also a two-state solution.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I hope the question got answered. And now,
Ujjwal, I think Ujjwal, I can see his hand coming up. Yeah, on your mic first.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen. One small question, sir. While what you are saying, diplomatically, our stand may be correct and in consonance with where the world is moving. But if you look at it from the Israel's point of view, they already did one exercise of providing autonomous rule and autonomous area to the Palestinians. And they've learned a very hard lesson, both in the Hezbollah controlled area as well as the Hamas controlled areas. Isn't it a fact? So why should Israel actually allow for a two-state solution?
See, okay, two facts. Let me cover it and explain that to you a little bit. You see, what Israel did was it has permitted Gaza and it's permitted West Bank. It is not a conducive area. West Bank is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And frankly, I don't know how much you've gone into the history, but Hamas was created by Israel, by Benjamin Netanyahu, only to prevent Yasser Arafat's Palestinian Authority from ruling over Gaza. They created Hamas. After creating Hamas, Hamas refused the Palestinian Authority's control over Gaza. It became an independent area controlled by Hamas. The West Bank is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Between the two is Israel. It is something like East Pakistan, West Pakistan, and India in between. There is no connection. They're two separate entities, one controlled by the Palestinian Authority, one by Hamas. Now, the one controlled by Hamas is the most crowded open-air prison on earth. Its size is, I think, 25 by 20 or something. Barely. Two sides is Israel, one side is the sea, one side is Egypt. Entry into Israel is from limited gates. They give you worker passes, you come in the morning, go home in the evening. Egypt has got the Rafah border. It has made its own wall, it's made its own gate, it doesn't permit anyone in. Nothing comes in from the sea without Israel's clearance because it controls the sea. So basically what you've got is this compact area. You created this monster. You made the monster do what you want. The monster then got out of your hand. And then came in Iran, then came in Qatar funding the monster. And the monster turned against it. It's happened everywhere. The Taliban was created by the US and Pakistan. It turned against the US, threw the US out of Afghanistan. Now it's turned against the Pakistan. It's sorting out Pakistan through the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So if you look at it, whenever you've created a monster, Indira Gandhi created Bindranwale. What happened? So wherever you've created a monster, at some stage the monster will bounce back. And this was Benjamin Netanyahu's creation in one of his earlier times, only to prevent the Palestinian Authority from gaining control.
Thank you, sir. I have another question, if you permit me.
Please.
Let me bring you all closer to India and its surroundings. Yeah. And the question here is, sir, you have China trying to wrestle into the Indian Ocean and try to work out routes through Thailand, through Burma, through Pakistan to get across, bypass this Malacca Strait and try to hem in India from all sides. Now, in the past, whether you can call it error or whatever, or judgment, but we have gifted something like Coco Islands, which is close to Burma, Tipu in Nipu in Sri Lanka. So we have ourselves tried to create Frankenstein monsters against us in the past. At least that is how it has turned out to be today. The other part is Maldives, yeah, the government there. Then in the past, because of certain unresponsiveness from our side, Sri Lanka played straight into the Chinese hands. Because of what we did to Nepal, Nepal also played into Chinese hands. Now, many of our past mistakes have come back to haunt us now. They've become very big. So how do you see this shaping up, and how do you see Indian security forces responding to these challenges? That is one. The second part is, why not use chosen islands in Lakshadweep and in Car Nicobar region and develop them as permanent air bases or maybe aircraft carriers, as we call it.
Okay. Let me start from taking it on from the beginning. Firstly, whatever happened in history, you can't reverse that. Let's take that. And possibly, I mean, I don't, I feel that whoever was in the chair at that time took a decision from what he considered as the best option. Today we look at it, we can criticize, but possibly at that time he took that decision. Okay, one. Number two, as I said earlier, that there is always a big brother syndrome. You must read that article somewhere in my blog on the big brother syndrome. There is a big brother syndrome. It always happens. You look at it, I'll take you from two examples and we'll handle it that way. Take China. China is in a tussle with all its neighbors. Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Korea, Japan, even Brunei. They are fighting for the atolls in the South and East China Seas. China claims them under the 9-dash line, and the whole lot of things are going on. The regular clashes there, that is why India, the US, all of us, I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Philippines has bought the BrahMos missiles delivered yesterday. That is one part. Now you come to our area. India is the big brother. Any nation which is big and powerful like India will always be considered as a sort of a threat to its neighbors. You may not be. We've never for once asked for an island. We've never asked for a base from any of these countries. But that sort of a threat or that feeling continues with these nations. And this is exploited politically. If you notice, every alternate government in Nepal, every alternate government in Sri Lanka, and every alternate government in Maldives will be pro-India and the other will be anti-India. Look at it over the last few years and you will get that. The reason is the fear of the big brother. We are still managing it. With Maldives, it is the Indian public which has themselves taken a decision not to go out on tourism. Today, the elections for the Maldives parliament have concluded. I have not read what the results are yet, which possibly may be out by tomorrow. But now, the opposition, which will come into power in the next elections, is pro-India. And the earlier one, Yameen, who was there earlier, was anti-India. So you will always have that change. Sri Lanka presidential elections are the end of the year. The current government is pro-India. The opposition is playing an anti-India card. So it is something which will keep happening. In Nepal, it will be a pro-India, it will be an anti-India. It will happen. Exactly what is happening in the East and South China Sea, a big brother with its neighbors will always be on a clash. Now, as I said in my talk, you will find India is providing support to nations which are in conflict with China. When Jaishankar was in Philippines, he openly said, we support you. You are right, China is wrong. When China comes here, they say they are right, India is wrong. So that is an issue which will remain. Third, when you mentioned about Indian bases, INS Jatayu has been opened in Lakshadweep. That is exactly what you were talking about. Where that base is opened, it has overridden any Chinese influence anywhere in Maldives, impacted any Chinese base in Djibouti. So it is a major one. Similarly, Maldives is one. In beyond Maldives, Mauritius, we've got a base. Okay, Andaman Nicobar is being developed. You're getting a base in Car Nicobar. You're expanding the ability of Andaman Nicobar. The command there is, why do you think you have a next naval admiral who's the lieutenant governor of Andaman Nicobar? It's to meet the requirements of the Navy and ensure that the bases are created. So you have Strategic Forces Command, which is the Andaman and Nicobar Command sitting there, and you have a lieutenant governor who's the next naval chief. So you're actually working in unison to ensure that Andaman Nicobar Island becomes a major base. India is not sitting back. And with INS Jatayu opened up in Lakshadweep, so you have got both sides. And these are what we would call fixed aircraft carriers, and you're expanding it. So you're able to deal with these.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Thank you for asking the question. I can see a question by Animitra Chakravarti. So actually he's asking, is pluralism plausible still, especially when you are losing your own land or demography to untamed infiltrators? This is his question.
See, the point is, now there is certain amount which the center can handle, the certain amount which is the state responsibility. Now when migration comes in, if you look at it, I don't know how many of you are aware of IMDT. The IMDT was pushed in for Assam by Indira Gandhi way back. Now, anywhere else, if you are arrested as a migrant, you have to prove I'm an Indian citizen, I'm not a migrant. Under the IMDT law for Assam, which was filled with then Bangladeshi migrants before the fencing took place, the onus is on the state to prove that individual is a migrant. It was a reversal. And IMDT law ensured that the migrants got established, they remained there because they became vote banks of a particular political party, which is why that party controlled the state for a very long time. Today, you're finding this happening in some regions. In other places, you're able to push them back. Let me tell you something which I think very few know. I've done it, so I've experienced it. In J&K, in Jammu, if you catch Bangladeshi migrants, you know what the government of India orders are? The most stupid orders you'll ever come across. You are supposed to put them in a train in Jammu. They are supposed to go on their own to somewhere in Calcutta, from where they will be pushed back. You put them on a train in Jammu station, they will get down at Samba and again try and cross over into Pakistan. No, I mean, if you're going to send them unescorted, are you actually acting against migrants? And once they are in, and today Jammu is surrounded by migrant colonies. Because the order state, BSF will catch them, put them on the train and send them. They get off the next station, they come back again. And that's what's happening. So we have this problem. Unless the government decides to act with force, unless the government decides to take a major step, this change will not take place.
Thank you, Harshaji. Also, I have the last question that we can ask. So actually, so we also saw what happened during farmer protests, right? So external powers jumped in, Rihanna jumped in, everyone had their vested interest, but what was the most shocking was that Indians supporting them. Some Indians were supporting them. Some Indians cry hoarse about this dying democracy and often plead foreign powers to intervene. So is this colonial hangover, or is this plain pure enmity against the country? So
It's
your views.
simple. It's pure politics.
Pure
Anyone
politics.
and anything is fair game in politics. And the intent is not anything else, it's to grab power. How you get it is of no consideration. I mean, I'm not going to refer to names, but I know whom you're talking about. And I would also say that when you stand on a foreign platform and you say that there is no democracy in India,
Mhm. Exactly.
whereas, I mean, it's the same government which has a 78% rating and is considered to be the nearest rival is at 65%, and he's the Mexican president.
Mhm.
But if you have this rating, does it mean that the government, that the Indian public has accepted a particular system? And you go abroad and say that we have nothing here. It's not democracy. So, I
Exactly.
mean, in politics, everything and anything is fair game.
Mhm. Sure, sure, sure. Okay, so thank you, Harshaji, for answering the question. Now, so we are running out of time. So we need to wrap the session. It has been an amazing and enlightening talk. All thanks to our guest, Major General Harsha Kakkarji, who explained us about the security challenges we face so beautifully. And thank you, sir, for enlightening us.
Total pleasure.
And also, I want
Likewise.
to thank our audience for their patient listening and learning. We will again come back with another knowledgeable speaker. Okay, so it's time to end the session. Again, thank you, everyone, especially Major General Harsha Kakkarji.
Thank you,
Okay,
Harsh.
so thank you, everyone. And so let's wrap this up. Namaste and Jai Hind.
Jay. Okay. Bye. See you then.
Jai Hind. Namaste.